Hello, welcome to today's session. We'll just give everyone a moment to spool into the webinar so that we don't start without anyone, and we'll begin the session proper in just a moment or two. Just wait a moment or two longer to allow delegates to arrive, beginning in just a minute. So welcome to everyone who is here, and we will begin very shortly. There we are. I think people have arrived. So hello and welcome to this member exclusive session on navigating the changing landscape. My name is Rachel Reed and I'm delighted to welcome our three panellists to the session today. They will introduce themselves and their business in a moment, but in the meantime, a warm welcome to all three of you. We look forward to hearing what you have to say very shortly. The pace of change and the requirement for increased flexibility in our industry is certainly a challenge to keep up with. And today we're going to discuss some of the issues around that, specifically customer contact preferences, payment flexibilities, operational demands. We may cover some other things as we go along, and do please submit any questions you may have for the panelists via the Q&A facility, and we will cover those as they come up. We'll be recording the session as usual, and we'll send it out to you afterwards, and we'll also post it on our Insight Hub tomorrow. So without further ado, let's move over to our panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about their business. And let's start with David.
Great, thanks Rachel. So hi everyone, my name is David Scott and I work for Open Destinations, where I head up the commercial team. So Open Destinations is a travel technology and outsourcing business based in London and Goa. The business is 25 years old and now employs over 600 people, of which about 250 of those are developers working on our products. Our flagship tech products are used by customers in over 35 countries, so from the UK and Europe to the Middle East and North America. And we have probably about 10,000 people logging into our systems on a daily basis. As you'd expect, so with a global customer base, we also provide support 24/7, all year round. And we offer a number of different products to support different types of businesses. So Travel Studio is our enterprise application. So that's aimed at supporting specialist tour operators and DMCs. Provides modules to support direct contracting, product sourcing through channel managers, third-party suppliers, drag and drop itinerary builders and group functionality, and then obviously distribution, so through all channels, be that UI for sales agents or online, both B2B and B2C, and obviously APIs as well. We've also got Rail Studio, so that helps luxury, regional and heritage rail companies. Travel Builder, so that's a pared back version of Travel Studio for small businesses. We also have a mobile app, so that works both B2B and B2C, so it puts itineraries and holiday information in front of customers. And then our business support services provide outsourcing to some of the leading travel companies, where we do things like loading and managing contracts, static data, content, and then providing customer service through the likes of WhatsApp as well. So yeah, so that's us. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, David. So you've got a broad range of solutions for problems, and presumably quite a lot of experience of some of the issues that our members would face. And thanks for that. Let's move over to Sarah Elston of Holiday Taxis. If you can just introduce yourself, Sarah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. Nice to be here today. So my name is Sarah Elston. I'm head of sales at Holiday Taxis. For those of you who don't know Holiday Taxis, we are a global aggregator of ground transportation solutions. We contract directly in all continents across the world, predominantly operating in the B2B space. We provide products and solutions to major travel brands across the world. We are part of HBX Group. We sit within the mobility division of HBX alongside some other well-known brands such as Beds Online and Hotel Beds. Our contact centre for Holiday Taxis is based in the UK here in Brighton, and I'm delighted to be here today. Thanks, Rachel.
Lovely, thanks, Sarah. And moving over to James, we've got James Lemon of Stripe. So let us know a little bit about what you're up to, James.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having us. So Stripe's a global payment infrastructure. So we've been around about 12 years. And last year, I think we processed about 1% of global GDP, just over $1 trillion. So we do that really by, on the B2C side, making it kind of frictionless and blisteringly easy to kind of create payment experiences, whether that be, online, in contact centers, or kind of in person in terminals. So we work with, kind of leading brands across travel and retail, everyone from Amazon and Zoom and Deliveroo and Uber and Airbnb and Booking.com. But probably less well known is behind the scenes, we also set out to make B2B money movements and payouts and revenue splits much simpler as well. So kind of hopefully gone are the days of finance teams spending huge amounts of time kind of reconciling and debating over revenue shares. We really want to make the back end of travel agencies, OTAs, hotel franchises much simpler as well. I joined the business about 2 years ago from the world of travel. So I have 5 years at Travelport in the kind of travel agency and travel distribution space. 7 years at IHG Hotels and Resorts, and about 4 years as a consultant, really kind of focused in innovation and strategy. So really kind of helping travel take a leap forward in the way it thinks about technology and digital tools is something I'm really passionate about. So yeah, delighted to be here and kind of share what we can.
Oh, that's great news. So thank you, James. Right, well, let's kick off with some of these issues that are facing people today. I mean, I think maybe we could start with customer contact preferences, because of course, obviously, everybody needs to be able to reach their customers and then keep in contact with them throughout the process and afterwards. And there really are an increasing number of ways that we can get in touch with customers, service their requests, and this is quite challenging and potentially costly, especially for small businesses. So I'd really be interested to hear what's your take on the changes in customer contact preferences over the last couple of years, and how you've adapted to it, or how you would advise other companies to do. Perhaps if we kick off with Sarah, anything that you might have to say on that.
Yeah, I think it's really key that you look at your customer base and have multiple communication channels available to your customers. Airlines do it particularly well with apps and push notifications. So when moving through airports, communicating delays, being able to offer, that compensation or repatriation, customers are less likely to look at emails. So that's the right channel of communication. At Holiday Taxis, we looked at our contact centre in 2022 and looked at, what typically the reason why agents and customers are calling us. And predominantly it was to reconfirm bookings and check pickup times. So last summer we developed a chatbot on our direct website and on our agent site, so that agents could quickly, in real time, get the information they wanted. And that significantly reduced the contact into our call centre and allowed our agents then to focus on that real customer care and support. So I think it's just understanding your customer base, looking at data, looking at insights, and then having that right channel available.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, I mean, David, kind of going on from that, what would be your take on that, and how, say, for example, a small business could get going on having all those multiple channels that Sarah was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess we've sort of focused on this from two angles, Rachel. So I suppose on the technology front, we've been putting a lot of work into developing our app Itinerary, which works both B2B and B2C, downloaded onto phones. Does a lot of what Sarah's talking about, so allows you to push information into an app that can be downloaded offline, view an itinerary, start to take out some of those pressure points where customers might have been getting in touch, so effectively remove some of that friction, and then really support your customers, not just sort of pre-sale, but also then sort of post-booking and then on holiday. So take away some of that stress that you have when customers are away. I think the second side that we've seen, or the other part of our business that's been really interesting, has been in our business support services teams, where we've just seen a massive increase in demand for customer service provided through the likes of WhatsApp and messaging and those kind of services. I'm sure all of us on this call use those services. And what we've really noticed is that, of course, there's been a bit of a shift in both sort of age and demographic who are using those services. So I guess people who came across the internet 20 years ago were very happy, as they hit their 50s and 60s using these services. And it's a real shift in how people all demographics are looking to communicate or willing to communicate away from, as Sarah said, that sort of traditional email service or even phone call, which a lot of people are telling us just isn't convenient anymore. You know, those messaging services, you can pick them up, you can use them whenever you want. I think the other bit that's really important, though, is that sat behind that is making sure that on the CRM front, you really recognize who that customer is and you've got a record of what you've talked about. So people don't want you to be, they don't want you to be not knowing what they're contacting you about in the first place. So actually that CRM piece, recognizing your customers, you know, who are expensive to acquire, know what they want to talk about, is also really key as well, or at least that's the feedback we're getting from our customers.
Actually, just an interesting point just before I come to you, James, on that, and maybe this is something Sarah might have a take on. You were saying, of course, nowadays it's not sort of old people who don't know about the internet anymore because everybody has been involved with it. And I just wondered whether you think we'll see the end of the call centre. I mean, people, will they just not want to phone? Do you think that'll ever happen, Sarah?
I think human contact is still going to be a requirement, but I think the need for real-time instant response is going to grow and continue to develop. And I think it's about that messaging at the right time and having that information available. But I don't think it's going to disappear completely, because I still think that human touch in travel is always going to be a requirement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the key differences in travel is it's a very expensive emotional product a lot of the time, and I think that always kind of comes back to, like you say, wanting someone to talk to about it before they make a choice. And James, coming over to you, obviously I know Stripe is a payment solution, but do you have anything on contact preferences? Does that come up for you?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think you know, I definitely agree with David and Sarah. I think this idea that everything kind of ends up in your CRM and you know more about your customers is absolutely the right vision to have. But I'd also say it's just such a fragmented or kind of nuanced landscape that even the same traveler on different occasions can behave completely differently in different channels, right? If it's a business trip, I might be forced to use the tool by my company. If it's a short break, I might be much more comfortable with kind of a direct airline plus hotel or an OTA. But of course, if it's that kind of longer, more special occasion, or if it's group travel, obviously much more opportunity for a kind of travel agency to really help curate that. So I think that, you know, for the long term, there'll be more channels and this channel complexity will exist. So look, Stripe come to market in a couple of ways, but I suppose we have this obsession with, you know, we really want to make sure that travel agencies never miss a chance to capture a payment in any channel. But also, I think we've got an opportunity to create really exciting new payment moments for travelers. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I think often as a travel agency, traditionally, we've been kind of one and done. We've got that booking, they've got the itinerary in their hand, let's leave them to it. And I think whether it is kind of taxis or excursions or, you know, we're missing all these opportunities to help people customize and really tailor their trip to something that's special for them. But, you know, we took their payment type, you know, took their credit card maybe 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, but you can still create, you know, you save that card and have a frictionless moment where you don't have to get your card out again to kind of add on your transfer or add on your excursion. And I think helping people tailor their trip, I think is critical, whether that be, you know, over WhatsApp, in an app, even in an email you send to them with a payment link, or if they kind of contact your contact center. You know, there's no excuse not to remember who that special customer is. And of course, part of loyalty, part of remembering who they are is payments. I think all journeys have an online segment now. I think you know, to your point around, you know, the pandemic kind of changing how everyone behaves, I think pretty much everyone will go online to do a level of, you know, inspiration and research. But I think as you kind of whittle down the kind of sales funnel into that decision moment, you know, there's certainly demographics that just feel you know, more comfortable picking up the phone, especially when it comes to payment. And we've obviously got a job to be compliant as well. You know, if we're still sitting there in contact centers writing down credit card numbers by hand or even taking credit card numbers under the phone, you know, well, that's exactly where Stripe steps in, is trying to help that compliant. We come to market in a couple of ways. I think, you know, if travel agencies have tech teams in-house, they can certainly build a direct relationship with us. We're incredibly self-serve. But I think more common is that Stripe's technology is tucked up inside the industry's kind of technology platform. So Open Destinations is a great example. So David and the team have basically built, you know, tailored solutions that travel agents can use, knowing that each of those payment touch points you have is kind of tucked up inside, powered by Stripe, but you don't have to stress as a travel agency that you've got to suddenly become this kind of master of payments because they do that. So yeah, definitely multiple channels are here to stay. I think kind of little magical payment moments can be a bit more seamless and more common to help people customize their trips. But it's not something that people need to be overly concerned about, because if you use the right tech platform to help you create those kind of purchase moments with the right guest data and payment data underneath, you can do it in a secure, safe way as well.
Absolutely. Well, because actually, perhaps we can come on to that in a bit later, James, when we do the payments. But that can sometimes be an issue when people are, overseas in a different environment and a different currency. They can feel a little bit less secure with the payment. Well, actually, why not? Let's cover that now. I mean, is that a kind of valid concern? Do you think, or are there things we can do to make our travellers feel secure about giving their card details when they're not in their home country?
There is absolutely loads you could do. We've got our kind of online checkout. We call it optimized checkout suite. I mean, we have 3,500 engineers at Stripe, and it's very easy to become a geek about just how important it is to build trust. We did a report last year called the State of the Checkout. Something like 97% of European checkouts had, basic mistakes that would help to build that sense of trust, and also just build that user experience that just means that it is a little bit less frictionless. It is a bit more seamless to check out. So yeah, I mean, everything from tiny things that should have been done a decade ago, like having the kind of like padlock to show it's secure, through to kind of dynamically recognizing the credit cards. You start typing it in, and you often see it pop up. It's like, yep, this is a Visa, this is an Amex. I think little steps like that just mean that it makes it easier for guests to kind of trust the website. And we all see it, right? Anyone who's shopping online, you see these best-in-class retail websites. One of the things that Stripe obsess about is bringing that to travel as well, with partners like Open Destinations, where you go, look, any travel agency should be able to have an online checkout that looks as seamless as a leading OTA that's spending the time doing this. But I think you can also include that in things like your payment links as well. So again, like sending out an email or even sending out an invoice, like forcing people to open up their banking app, add you as a pay you back, like that's just really tedious and will become a blocker to conversion. So I think having a kind of simple payment link that people trust, you can fully brand it with your travel agency, really high quality stuff. Yeah, lots going on kind of on the front end that customers see and on the back end behind the scenes. But I was chatting with the head of Google recently, and she was saying that she's got to the point now where if it even just says kind of powered by Stripe on the checkout, she's like, oh, well, if I've never been to this retailer before, at least I know it's the same company that are powering like Amazon and all these kind of leading companies. So lots of little things you can do, and happy to share that state of the checkout report with everyone as well, because it's an interesting space.
Well, that would be wonderful, gents. If that is available, if you can send it through, we will send it out to the delegates once we send the follow-up through. So if you have that available, we will include it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of move on to payments. Just a reminder to everyone listening, do just type in your questions as you think of them in the Q&A, and we'll pick them up as we go. So feel free to do so. I mean, obviously, payments became a real sort of trend changer, I guess, during the pandemic, because people wanted to be able to cancel. People just wouldn't book if they couldn't cancel at short notice. Nobody wanted to book far ahead. And I think it was a real challenge for our industry to have to accommodate that, because as we all know, flexibility can be expensive and complicated. Simplicity is complicated, I suppose, in some of the ways. But so I think really we saw this trend to need to be a lot more flexible with regards to cancellation, paying less up front, being able to change things, and that can create quite a few cash flow problems if you've got to wait longer for your payments. So I think if we kind of think about that, perhaps asking Sarah, how did you have to cope and adapt, and have you made permanent changes?
Yeah, I think like all companies, we had to look at our credit facilities and avoid exposure. And I think as a travel brand, you still need to entice customers with that flexibility and favourable cancellation terms. And I think that's not just post-pandemic. I think that's here to stay now. From our point of view, we did look at our credit facilities with our partners, and we looked at our core kind of client base, where a lot of them will take their final payment for their holiday 6 weeks before departure. So we offered a new credit facility where clients paid, so they could make the booking, but then they paid 6 weeks before departure, and that seems to work really well. But I think that trend is definitely here to stay. I think the other thing as well to note is lead times are a lot longer now, particularly with the cruise industry. We're seeing that with our key cruise clients, that customers are booking up to 2-3 years in advance. So it's how you manage that, how you hold your rates, and manage those bookings across all suppliers. So yeah, some key trends there that are here to stay, I think.
Yeah, and so David, given that we do think they're here to stay, what is it that people can do to adapt? Are there solutions that people can adopt, or ways they can change their business models?
Yeah, so I think, Rachel, I think we see this open destinations from two different angles. So I think for the travel companies we work with the end customer, I guess there's a couple of points to it. So firstly, it's actually about being more flexible and thinking more carefully about the kind of holiday product they're selling, and making sure that actually they're comfortable varying terms and conditions around rules, around deposits, around payments, and then making sure that actually when a customer checks out, you can manage that payment flow all the way through to receiving that cash. And actually, we've done quite a lot of work with James and the team at Stripe to enable that for our customers through the platform. The second part to that, of course, is just making sure in the first place that you're catching that payment. I mean, I think one thing when you step back and think about this, and I think James alluded to this very briefly, is that, once you have acquired a customer or you've re-engaged a customer who's traveled with you before, what you really don't want to do at the point at which they're willing to pay is to lose that customer. So just make sure that you're really nailed down in terms of collecting that cash from your customer when they're willing to pay. Seems like a bit of a shame to go through all that hard work and then to lose it at the last minute. On the flip side to that, on the supply side, we also see it from a couple of angles as well, but clearly it's getting a lot trickier. So, those supply cycles, as you said, are changing. Hotels who traditionally may have only worked direct in the past are now working with channel managers, they're working with third-party providers, with wholesalers as well. So actually, it means you've got to think slightly differently about how you're managing your own cash flow as well. And there's lots of different ways that our customers are thinking about this. Again, James will know more about this than I do, but virtual credit cards, we're starting to see some of those conversations coming up as a way of tackling some of those payment issues. And as I said before, also just making sure that you're very clear and very flexible on how you want to sell to your customers and how that marries back up to how you're buying in the back as a supplier.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Well, let's move on to James. Obviously, payments is very much your bag. So yeah, we'd love to hear, what's your take on the need to be flexible?
Yeah, I think look, I mean, ultimately, let's look at the consumer side first and think about travelers. The fact is, there is an element, I think, of demanding flexibility. You're right, there's a bit of a mindset shift, but also, in most economies with kind of cost of living pressures, just household budgeting and the idea of spreading payments over time is, well, frankly, just kind of good common sense. If I have to pay for everything now versus a chance to spread it over time, it's just good budgeting that I'll try and spread over time. So we are seeing, I mean, for me, it's almost foundational or table stakes, if you like. You should be offering an installment product. We saw an Australian travel agency offer an opportunity to kind of pay part now and then settle up later, and their conversion rate went up 20%. And so you just go, it's just a foundational thing you need to do. And if you think in the last 18 months, most of the big OTAs, like your Booking.coms and your Airbnbs, have introduced installment offerings. So if you just want to keep up with the alternatives your travelers have, that's where you need to start. In that, I think it would be remiss of me not to let just touch on what we call kind of the buy now, pay later offerings as well. So installments is just kind of capturing a payment on a card, and before the trip, I'll capture another payment. Buy now, pay later. So your Klarnas in Europe, a company called kind of Affirm, pretty popular in the US. That's a little bit different. You as a travel agency get 100% of the money now, and then the customer's relationship switches to one with Klarna, and they pay them back over time. Lots of debate around the ethics of that and the values of that. But one thing I'd say from kind of learning a bit more about this space, exactly the same debate was had about 40 years ago with credit cards. Some people were outraged when fast food joints took credit cards. Like, well, look, if you can't afford fast food for lunch, you really shouldn't be putting it on credit. And of course, how far we've come as a society, we just go, again, that's just how a lot of people choose to pay. So I think these buy now, pay laters are becoming really popular choices, particularly among younger travelers. And it's something kind of I've used as well. I think just as people kind of think about household budgeting, why not kind of spread your costs over time, and things like kind of failure rates on those are far below 1%. I think they've become a lot more responsible recently, and of course it's in the interest of your clients and your firms that they don't want to have you'd be working with people with bad credit. So I think there's a couple options there to give customers that flexibility. If I think about running your business, absolutely, I think that the more you can kind of help customers through that journey, the better. To David's point, once you've captured their credit card once, you can now automate those retries and those kind of additional installments. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, the admin of managing all these additional payments is going to be huge, you're effectively setting up a short subscription. Think about it like that. I'm just going to keep capturing the money until it's done. So it's actually very, very simple to do, including automated, kind of email chasers if necessary, and that communication needs to be key. In terms of on the back end and kind of managing your supply base, David touched on this. Like, it's definitely not easy, but I think that most travel partners now are up for conversations about kind of extended credit terms. There's still very few partners in the travel industry who will insist on 100% payment right now. I think probably the airlines are up there with probably the ones that do. But again, I think you can, I guess it's up to you to kind of form your own kind of treasury business, if you like, which is actually like, what's the amount I need to take from my customer to make sure I can kind of meet my suppliers. What we don't like to see, and I think happened a lot in the pandemic, and hopefully this isn't a controversial discussion, is like, you should not be spending traveler funds on your own overheads like your staff, because that really is the customer's money until they have traveled. So Stripe are very responsible, and we work with our travel agencies and partners like Open Destinations to talk a lot about credit risk, because that was a big problem in the pandemic. Effectively, everyone had to give the money back, and either money had been passed down the supply chain, and it's wholesalers, hotels, airlines, distributors, but unfortunately the worst practice was actually that customer money had just been spent on company overheads, and they were waiting for their next tranche of customers to settle the bills. So it is a space worth kind of educating yourself about in terms of kind of managing cash flow, but also managing risk. Probably more complicated than we'll get to in this webinar, but look, customer flexibility on the front end, I think, is critical, and then setting up your business so you can be kind of responsible and secure on the back end, I think is an obligation that we all have as operators in the travel space.
Yeah, thanks for that. That just made me think of something. Obviously we're saying as an industry we need to offer this increased flexibility around particularly cancellation at shorter notice. And I'm wondering perhaps that Sarah, you might have a take on this, possibly David and James as well. But do we think that, is it more of a sort of comfort blanket, or are people actually cancelling at shorter notice? I mean, Sarah, what have you found in terms of cancelling?
I think we've definitely seen a slowdown in cancellation rates. I think it is more of a comfort blanket for sure. I think it's just another part when you're shopping around. It's just another USP and to support that conversion, really, to know that you've got that flexibility. But certainly from our side, from our business, we're certainly seeing that cancellation rate slow right down.
Interesting. I don't know. Do you see that, James or David? Or David, you look like you had something to say.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Sarah and the Holiday Taxis team are on the coalface, so they will be the experts in terms of what the end consumer is asking for. But we're certainly seeing customers, seeing our customers, so I guess the travel companies that we work on the technology front, putting a lot more thought into thinking about how they structure the terms around the holidays they offer. And thinking quite carefully about the products that they include in those packages. They're thinking carefully about how they're sourcing product to support them. So actually making sure they work with people like Holiday Taxis who may be more flexible, avoiding accommodation that might be non-refundable, and then find themselves on the hook for it. So putting a lot more thought into the individual terms and conditions around the kind of packages they're selling, and varying that by product type. So thinking about whether it's a cruise, whether it's about a sun and beach holiday, or a multi-centre where they might be on the risk for a lot more than for a lot more in terms of overall value of the holiday. So yeah, so we're definitely seeing people thinking a lot more carefully about how they set their product up, and therefore what that means in terms of what they're responsible for and what their end consumers are paying for at certain times.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Have you seen that, James, in terms of anything on increased cancellation because of the facility?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think immediately after the pandemic, cancellation rates went to kind of levels we've never seen before. But that was really just the kind of uncertainty of actually, will I even be able to travel? What on earth is going to be going on in my personal life at that time? So I think things have settled down a little bit, but I do think there was a slight retraining of the customer to kind of keep options open. And so, look, I mean, for me on the B2C side, it's about having the right options. I think David touched on it, almost the right kind of incentives to nudge behaviors. I think there's certain trip types where people will commit, hey, I really want to protect my kind of large family holiday, and I will try and get great value, and I know that time's booked off, versus perhaps some of the kind of smaller short breaks where it's like, actually, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to be free in November. I don't know if we're going to do that. But I think for me, it's still really important to charge that optionality. I'd also say, all of the trips can still be prepaid for. It's just about that kind of flexibility of kind of when the billing happens. So take the hospitality space. We're seeing a lot more brands move towards the kind of prepayment that you typically see in the kind of, vacation rental, kind of holiday cottage industry. Everything's paid for before check-in, and that's a really easy thing to set up, which is a shift, right? Because you used to pay mostly on checkout. So I think consumers are being nudged towards kind of prepayment, but that's different to I'm committing 100% of the funds now, and I know I'm never going to get them back. I think there's creative things people can do also in terms of cancellation, in terms of offering credits and things like that. We see a lot of the travel agencies do that, and that kind of provides a certain amount of lock-in and kind of cash flow reassurance as well. So yeah, definitely an interesting space and one to be aware of, I think. But I think the team here made great points.
Thank you. I tell you, actually, what it sort of sprung to mind was last week was English Tourism Week, and I was listening to a presentation from someone from one of the market research companies. It was about the UK domestic holiday market, and it had said, what was the reason for you cancelling your UK holiday? It was the usual illness, unforeseen circumstance, the weather was really bad. But there was a thing about 5% that said, well, I never intended to go anyway, which I thought was quite amusing. I don't know why you put that in your deposit, but it was quite interesting. So that was, I suppose, that was what was in my mind when I'd asked that question. But anyway, should we move on? Thinking about perhaps a little bit broader on in terms of operational environment, because that's another kind of big challenge for lots of people in our industry. And it seems to be, it becomes more and more complex because we have all these different channels we can work through, different people we can reach and work with, customers wanting personalization, certain destinations have demands that they put in place. And I just was wondering, really, perhaps coming to David first, what are you seeing with your customers and clients in terms of their operational demand challenges, and how are you helping them, really, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess operationally, so the day-to-day running of travel businesses that we work with, and I suppose especially when their customers then get away on holiday, I think we all hope that this summer we'll sort of see things start to get a bit smoother in terms of, I guess, really the mess that a lot of travel companies experienced post-COVID. And again, Sarah will be best placed to speak on the in-resort experience because, those guys were on the coalface of having to manage customers coming in. But, there was all sorts of issues, wasn't there? There was, airports being understaffed, hotels perhaps not opening, and supply challenges in resorts, and that really carried on into last summer. We all hope it will be easy this summer, but I suppose the reality is that you're only ever just around the corner from the next operational challenge. You only have to think about the wildfires in Greece last year, and I suppose the real key or the real focus from the travel companies we work with is getting focused on making sure that they've got ways for their customers to either quickly get in touch with them digitally, and we've touched on this earlier, but we're supporting them through our itinerary to do that, or thinking more strategically about setting up teams to manage things like duty offices and WhatsApp and messaging and those areas that are always on. So effectively taking some of that stress away from the day-to-day operations of their business and having small teams organized to run that for them. So I think that that's kind of the real bit that we've kind of found that our customers focused on really is just making sure that they're clear on how they can communicate with their customers across the different channels, both I suppose sort of pre-sale, so pre-point of sale, all the way through to that gap between they've made a payment and they're going away, and what are the opportunities to talk to those customers in the right channels, and then what does that mean when they're away, when those real challenges arise. And I think customers are expecting an awful lot more than they were expecting before. I think there were some pretty interesting stats, I think, around pre-COVID, people making bookings online, going away on holiday. I think that the big tour operators would have said in the past, actually there was a lot of cases where where they were questioning whether having overseas reps was even necessary. There's a real change in behavior post-COVID, where people are just expecting people to be there and available if they need them. And I think that's probably a real shift again, and something that perhaps we thought was going to fall away, but seems to have stayed and is actually as important now as it was as we came out of the pandemic a few years ago.
That's interesting. And so, Sarah, I mean, moving over to the coalface, as it were, what are you finding?
I think we have, as a business, we've seen some challenges post-pandemic. So, operationally overseas, staff shortages, issues at airports, delays, etc. And I think what I can take from that is what we've learned now becomes our best practice. So to be proactive ahead of peak season, to work collaboratively with your suppliers, to share your training, to understand your processes, to see where you can automate where possible. And I think it is just to have those processes identified, shared, communication channels shared with your customers, and having those processes ready in, should there be an incident or should there be disruption, and just working collaboratively with your suppliers and your clients and delivering that unique value proposition.
Absolutely. James, coming to you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can keep it really quick. I think the team has said it. It literally is about kind of automation, looking at those low value tasks, or, in the nicest possible way, kind of shifting some of the effort onto the consumer. So making sure, to David's point, they have an app or an online portal where they can just go in and they can just kind of feel confident, I suppose, that they can at least check in on what their itinerary are. Maybe you switch to kind of a kind of text kind of contact center support, in that portal, rather than kind of consume your team with phone calls. I think the more that you can kind of push to that, then when there is a kind of one-off event, you're certainly much more responsive to actually, we can be on the front foot in terms of kind of communication and clarity, reduce some of that confidence. These are really important holiday experiences for people. So the more that you can help them feel confident and secure in the choice they've made and what's about to happen, I think it is great. And that means, I think, just being really careful about picking the best partners, that technology layer around people like Open Destinations, where you go, great, actually, I've got, in any channel, I can now kind of message people, at scale when things happen. And then behind the scenes with partners like Stripe, it's, well, look, there may be tasks you've never even thought of that your finance team is spending time on, like fraud. The rise of things like kind of card testing as you enable online payments is shooting up, and with artificial intelligence, the bad guys, as it were, are getting way smarter around kind of testing systems. So that means you really need to turn to kind of best-in-class partners who are obsessing with keeping you and your travelers' money safe, keeping those kind of things at bay. It's stuff that can easily suck up time behind the scenes of the finance team, who again should be moving on to higher value tasks. So I think it's just really kind of a close partnership with your partners on how can they help you with some of these topics like automation and kind of process efficiency. So keeping an eye on those things, I think, should be really kind of everyone's job, and talking about efficiency and some of those metrics that support productivity in your business should probably be things that you look at regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we might sort of broaden our outlook a bit at the moment. Obviously, we've spoken about some specifics, and I would be interested to know, I mean, whether there's sort of anything else on your mind, really, in terms of challenges, you know, and things that are changing in the business landscape. And just before we come to our panelists, just to remind people listening, do type in a question if you want to, because we're coming fairly close to the end of our session now. So if there is anything you feel we haven't covered, do drop that into the Q&A. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about that, perhaps coming to you, David, in terms of just, is there anything we haven't discussed that you think actually we should be, you know, people should be thinking about this a bit more? This is a change from the last few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess there's probably a couple of areas that I think are quite interesting. So I think on the product side, customers are definitely becoming more adventurous, and we see the travel companies we work with just trying to think a little bit more carefully about how they can differentiate what they offer. So finding experiences that match their product perfectly. You know, we're not, you know, this isn't about necessarily trying to sort of, this can be on any scale, but how do you take your own product and differentiate it so it's relevant for your customers, personalize it to what they want to see. So we're seeing a real focus in that space and what that means in terms of sourcing and setting up product and making sure they get that side of things right. We're also seeing a real focus, as you'd expect, on and more on customer service. And you know, I think we touched on this earlier, but you know, customers do expect you to remember who they are, where they last went on holiday, to recognize them, to understand what they've experienced, what they've enjoyed, known, or recognize if something has gone wrong in the past. So that piece there again is becoming really important, especially because you know we all know that acquiring customers is expensive. So you know, do your best to hold on to the ones you've got and make sure you know what they like and recognize them as soon as they come through the door where you can do. And I think the other area that we're seeing a real area of focus, and I think probably some of the large tour operators with reps overseas, and you know, Sarah will have seen this as well, just as I have done. Years ago, noticed this idea of dealing with issues in resort really quickly. Now, if you're a travel company based here in the UK or based overseas who may not have those people in resort, how do you get that feedback quickly from your customers? And we've seen a couple of quite interesting user cases of people using our app to get feedback from people after an individual hotel stay, where they might be staying in multiple hotels. If there are any issues picking up and dealing with those whilst the customers are away, I don't know, it might be putting a bottle of wine in the next hotel they're staying in their room to apologize. And that's sort of turning sort of annoyed customers into advocates, and you know, sort of much cheaper than dealing with the customer when they get back. And you know, so these kind of areas and dealing with feedback, recognizing your customers, range of products, those sort of areas seem to be things that are coming up quite a lot in conversation with our customers at the moment.
I very much like the take of turning an annoyed customer into an advocate. I mean, that's kind of double value, isn't it? Really, you're saving yourself losing them, and you're getting the benefit.
Yeah, and much cheaper. I mean, you know, again, as I said, you know, the large tour operators who've had people overseas who've been able to do this for years, but you know, there are some really interesting stats about it being, you know, much cheaper, obviously, to deal with an issue then and there than waiting for a customer to come back having sort of stewed on an issue for the entire holiday before they write to you by email or whatever way they get in contact with you when they get back.
Yes, yeah, well, absolutely. And actually, I think, and we'll come to you, Sarah, in a moment as well, on this, but I think people actually feel reassured if they see, say, a review that says, I had a problem and it was handled excellently and this is what happened, versus a review from someone who didn't have a problem, because it's really, if everything's fine, it's all good, isn't it? And I think that's a really interesting point that you've made there, David. So Sarah, coming to you, do you find customers are becoming more adventurous, or are there other trends and watch outs that we should think about?
Yeah, I agree with what David said, actually, and I think expectations are higher from the platinum clients we work with. Service is absolutely key for their clients, and that proactive complaint resolution, responding to complaints before they even become a complaint, is key. So we work with our clients, we share their insights, their customer feedback, and we proactively act on that. I think it's, going back to what we were talking about, that having that right communication channel, and I'll go back to airlines. So if there is a delay and the customer isn't communicated to, the customer is going to go to the cabin crew and the ground staff and not get the answer that they want. Whereas an airline that has a push notification that informs the client or the customer and gives them some, a voucher at that point, it's going to keep that customer satisfaction. So I think it's absolutely key, and service is key, will continue to be so.
Absolutely. So coming to you, James, any trends, not specifically in payments, obviously I know you have a wider industry background as well, so interested to hear from you on that.
Yeah, no, I think the points made that are great. A couple that I'd add. I think, look, it's really exciting. So, typically in previous kind of times of economic hardship, if you like, travel tends to suffer pretty hard. But actually, it really feels like people are protecting these kind of experiences, the kind of the trips of a lifetime, getting together with kind of family and friends, which is fantastic for our industry. They are getting a bit more adventurous. I think you alluded to it. So maybe they're thinking more about sustainability and want to take more holidays by train where maybe they flew, or they want slightly more local experiences. So maybe going slightly off the beaten track in terms of the the tours and in-destination experiences they might take. Or frankly, there's just a lot more options now. Whereas transfers may have been a bit more traditional. Now there's lots of kind of ride sharing apps. I think for me, that means that travel agencies definitely need to be open-minded to having a much larger supply base. And so we are obsessed with kind of helping people with that. Typically we have a kind of what we call an ecosystem technology, where all of those B2B payouts and commission splits and revenue shares can all be done digitally. So someone can almost kind of onboard onto your own platform, if you like, and then when you need to pay them, you can literally do it at a click of a button, or set it out to be automated with again kind of revenue shares, etc. So I think being prepared to manage a larger supply base is probably kind of theme one. I think that's just what you need to stay relevant, because others are doing it. The other theme, I think, which is really critical, is that how do you think about managing things like seasonality or economies that are at slightly different strengths? It might be that the UK has a really tough couple of years, but there's other markets out there that are popping and can help you as a business leader really manage some of those kind of highs and lows of demand. So for me, it's have you thought seriously about opening up new source markets? It's probably easier to do that than ever. And one of the things that we really kind of want to help businesses with is, whether you're contact center led or whether you're online led, enabling your kind of checkout and that moment you take payments to be much more localized. So if you are spreading out into Europe, there's going to be different kind of payment types, like Blick in Poland or Ideal in Holland, that maybe you wouldn't expect a UK consumer to use. So for us, it's really important that we can help travel agencies get paid in new currencies, present those currencies to consumers in a way that, again, they kind of recognize, they feel confident how much they're going to pay, or even kind of brand new payment types. A few years ago, I think we'd all say the world was led by credit cards, but I think it's just really important to know there's now hundreds of ways that customers are familiar in paying. And so kind of squeezing those all into your checkout with really good kind of simple user experience is critical. But I definitely would feel more confident than in the past that it's easier to open up into new source markets. And that plays us a really great role in terms of the growth of your business, managing that seasonality, maybe navigating away from some of the more kind of challenged economies. And would definitely be something I put on the roadmap.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot of points on that roadmap today. We're really at the end of our session time. We've got no further questions from the delegates, so I think we will wrap up. I think that's been a really interesting kind of race through issues and trends. So thank you all. So thank you, Sarah, David and James. As I say, we will make the recording available to you very soon, and I hope to see you on another session. So I wish you all a good day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Bye.
Rachel. Cheers.
Thanks, Rachel.